During the tail end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, a film logo which would feature a gargoyle adorning a spooky castle would feature before many horror films during this time. Dark Castle Entertainment, a company known for producing horror schlock, would be formed by Joel Silver, Robert Zemeckis, and Gilbert Adler. The goal of Dark Castle Entertainment was originally to remake the many films of director William Castle. Their first foray was the remake of House on Haunted Hill, a remake of the Vincent Price horror classic, which did moderately well. Next up would be the remake of Castle's film 13 Ghosts. William Castle was known for his gimmicks. In fact, he was dubbed the king of gimmicks by cult film director John Waters. Castle would use things like vibrating chairs while the creature from The Tingler was on the loose, or a flying skeleton during the finale of House on Haunted Hill. For 13 Ghosts, he would also use a gimmick that he would dub as Illusiono. During the film, anytime a ghost would come on screen, everything would be blue except for the ghosts, which were seen as red. Everyone who went to the film would be handed those classic red and blue glasses, so you could look through the red if you wanted to see the ghost, or if you were a scaredy cat, you could look through the blue. The remake was released in 2001, and although it did decent enough at the box office, it actually lost money. Though over the years it has obtained something of a cult following and has seemed to only grow in popularity. So today we're going to look at the story of 13 Ghosts, and after, we'll look at the backgrounds of each one. Anyways, let's begin. The film begins in a junkyard as Cyrus Kritikos attempts to capture a very violent ghost known as the Juggernaut. He's helped by a psychic named Dennis Rafkin, a man who really does not want to be there knowing the danger they are in. Dennis can see where the ghosts are and who they have killed. However, using his ability, it seems to bring him great pain. The only reason he's even helping to begin with is because he's being paid a great deal of money. In order to draw out the Juggernaut, they spray a trail of blood, leading to a glass containment cube, which is covered with spells and incantations that will help prevent the ghost from escaping. Like the original film, the only way to actually see the ghosts is with special glasses. How they work exactly is unknown. They begin playing a spell over some loudspeakers to help draw out the entity, but it really only seems to anger him. Cyrus's men pay dearly for what they're trying to do. One guy in particular gets it really bad when he's folded in half and pulled into a car. I don't know what the plan was exactly, but the Juggernaut leaves a trail of blood as he takes out Cyrus's men one by one until he finally enters the cube and is captured. Meanwhile, Cyrus is found to have been killed by the Juggernaut in all the ensuing chaos. We're then introduced to the Kritikos family, the children Kathy and Bobby, the mother Jean, and the father Arthur. A tragic fire takes the life of Jean, leaving Arthur with the children. Struggling to make ends meet, Arthur has hired on a nanny named Maggie to help tend to the home while Arthur deals with the financials and loss of his wife. But a knock at their door may turn things around. A lawyer representing Cyrus Kritikos, who is Arthur's late uncle, has left him something in his will. Cyrus is leaving Arthur his home, the culmination of Cyrus's life work. But since Arthur barely knows his uncle and only met him a few times as a child, it's odd that Cyrus would leave him such an extravagant home. Also, the spooky faces bordering Cyrus's video should lead to some concern as well. As the family drives to see their new home, we are treated to a quick montage of a ghost rights protester packing away various instruments and spells for something. The house looks to be made of glass panels, containing the same kind of incantations that were used to capture the Juggernaut. Dennis Rafkin, played by the great Matthew Lillard, is also at the house, posing as a power guy so he can get inside. He's really there because he never got paid by Cyrus and wants his damn money. As the family admires their new glass home, full of sliding doors and mechanical gears, Dennis heads off on his own looking for the basement and hopefully his payment. Arthur goes to the library to fill out the paperwork with the lawyer and tells his family to stay put. Obviously, they don't listen and instead take off into the labyrinthian glass home. Meanwhile, in the basement, Dennis has a quick vision in his head and notices the same containment cubes he used with Cyrus to capture the ghosts. Luckily, Dennis still has a pair of glasses and he finds one of the ghosts standing behind, luckily still contained. More and more ghosts make themselves known, but if quick strobing lights aren't your thing, then you're gonna have a bad time. Before Arthur signs the papers, Dennis comes in like a stark raving lunatic to tell him that he used to hunt ghosts with his uncle. He tells Arthur about the containment cubes in the basement and that he needs to get his family the hell out of there. Meanwhile, Maggie and Bobby have found a pair of those glasses and Kathy is enjoying her new room. After Dennis has another seizure from his visions, the lawyer disappears down into the basement, where he takes a briefcase filled with cash that Cyrus had left for him. Removing the briefcase activates some kind of lever, which causes the home to go into lockdown, trapping everyone inside and reconfiguring the entire thing like a maze. On top of that, it also unleashes the first ghost, the angry princess. While not being directly responsible for the lawyer's death, she does cause him to walk into one of the sliding sections, which slices him right in half, looking like something out of a science journal. With Arthur unable to find his family, he tells Dennis to check the basement while he checks the upstairs. Kathy, enjoying her new bathroom, is unaware that a poorly rendered CGI pair of those glasses reveals that the angry princess is in the bathroom with her. Kathy is so oblivious that she doesn't even notice the shower curtain moving behind her. Before the angry princess can attack Kathy, her father comes in asking her where her brother is. Although I'm not sure why the angry princess would stop her attack, simply because Arthur entered the room. The house continues to change like a giant lament configuration, opening and closing pathways as a way to draw all the ghosts to the heart of the building. Little Bobby is drawn to the basement by a ghostly voice that claims to have something for him, but while he traverses the steps, another voice tells him to go back, that it's not safe. Arthur tells his daughter and Maggie to go outside and wait for him to grab Bobby, but they're sealed in shut. There's no way out and they can't even break any of the glass panels to escape. Since there's no way to leave, they instead decide to find Bobby. Dennis explains to the other members of the family that the walls are inscribed with containment spells and that the ghosts cannot cross through them. They obviously don't believe anything he says, but he tells them he can prove it with a pair of these glasses, which will reveal the ghost to them. Bobby, in the meantime, is being chased by a few of the ghosts until he runs straight into one of the containment units. When he recovers, he sees the ghost of his mother, who tells him to go back upstairs and leave the basement. But that's when he runs into the ghost of Cyrus, who seemingly takes the young boy. The four decide to make the best decision you can make in any horror film and split up. In a house full of ghosts that is constantly changing its floor plan, I'm not sure this was the greatest decision. Dennis is finally able to prove to Maggie that the ghosts are real when they come face to face to a still locked up hammer. But Dennis does notice that some of the doors have been opened, so they're going to have to be very careful. Arthur and Kathy find Bobby's recorder and hear his screams as he was being chased by the ghosts. Kathy tries to assure her father that his son will be okay, but after what happened to his wife, I just don't think he can mentally handle another family member's passing. Arthur still refuses to believe that the home is filled with ghosts, but when Kathy throws on the glasses, she's introduced to one of the most violent ghosts, the Jackal. Kathy is attacked, but because it's a ghost, there really isn't much her father can do. Although this scene feels like it was mostly thrown in so they could get Shannon Elizabeth in her bra. However, just in the nick of time, Kalina the protester arrives and throws a quicksilver flare, something that these ghosts are apparently afraid of. They manage to get behind one of the pieces of glass that just happens to close in front of the Jackal. But meanwhile, Dennis and Maggie have their hands full as well as they're confronted by the Firstborn Son and the angry princess. Kalina explains that she sets captured spirits free, however I'm not sure a ghost like the Jackal should ever be set free. What they're in isn't exactly a home, it's a machine. It was designed by an astrologer in the 15th century while he was under demonic possession. It requires the 13 ghosts to power it, and gives the person controlling it the ability to see into the past, the present, and the future. Kind of like the chronovisor the Vatican is said to own. Somehow during all of this exposition, Kathy just up and vanishes. However, with the Firstborn Son blocking their path, they need to keep on moving. Maggie and Dennis get separated, and the torn prince starts to swing away with his baseball bat. Dennis manages to escape, and he and Maggie find their way back upstairs to the main floor. Kalina and Arthur find their way up through one of the panels, meeting back up with Dennis and Maggie, but as Arthur is getting ready to go up, the hammer is released from his cube. They pull him up just in time, but it's a real close call. The Jackal makes an unwanted return, clawing Arthur's back. Dennis scares it off by throwing a flare at it, but things only get worse as the Pilgrimes charges straight for them. They manage to get into another room before she can do any harm. We get a little infighting when Arthur finds out that his wife is the fourth ghost, and then an exposition dump when Kalina explains everything that's going on. For the machine to work, it requires 12 earthly spirits, each representing part of the Black Zodiac, a dark inverse of the regular Zodiac. The ghosts will be drawn to the center where one by one their energy will be absorbed, opening the Eye of Hell, which gives whoever controls it the power to see anything and everything, unlimited knowledge. The only failsafe to stop the machine is the 13th ghost, a ghost born of a willing sacrifice of love. So it's up to Arthur to jump into the Eye of Hell and sacrifice himself in order to stop the machine and save his kids. There is a second option though, because Kalina is packing a good amount of explosives. Dennis doesn't think any of this makes sense, but Arthur is willing to do anything to save his children, even going out with one of the enchanted slabs of glass with Dennis to search for them. While the two men are out looking for the kids, Maggie and Kalina find the inner workings of the machine and plan on blowing it up. Although the entire thing turns out to be a double cross when the ghost of Cyrus comes in and Kalina knocks Maggie out. Except Cyrus never actually died. He somehow survived and Kalina had been working with him from the beginning. Her true allegiance was actually alluded to earlier in the film when she was packing her bag, as she took the drawing spell instead of the containment spell. Arthur and Dennis have their hands full when they are met by the hammer. However, things get even worse for them when the final and most powerful ghost, the Juggernaut, is released. The two ghosts give Dennis a violent and deadly beatdown as poor Arthur can only watch on. Cyrus then uses the drawing spell that Kalina brought to summon all the ghosts to the center where their essence will be used to power the machine. He then triple crosses Kalina because once he got from her what he needed, he had no more use for her. The central part of the machine then opens up and Arthur's kids are in the middle. The ghosts all surround it as the machine begins to draw from them. Arthur is then confronted by his uncle, but remembering what Kalina said, he gets ready to make his jump to hopefully save his children. Except realizing he's supposed to be number 13, then why is Cyrus there? He removes his glasses and charges at his uncle for what he's done to his family. But Cyrus ends up getting the upper hand and reveals that he had chosen his nephew and his family. The 13th ghost won't stop the machine, instead it's needed to activate it. Before Arthur can be forced to make the leap, the spell and machine start going haywire as Maggie starts messing with all the controls. This causes the ghosts to be broken free from their trance, where they grab Cyrus and toss him directly into the machine. Dennis comes back as a ghost and tells Arthur he can still save his children, and defying all logic, even for a movie about ghosts, Arthur somehow lands this jump without being sliced into a million pieces, all while the entire machine starts blowing up, sending shards of glass flying in every direction. And then the ghosts just leave. I guess once they were set free, they all became completely non-violent. The family then all hug it out and say their goodbyes to their ghost mom, and that's it. The film was seen as a disappointment, and because it ended up losing money, it would be the last William Castle film that Dark Castle would ever end up remaking. The ghosts presented throughout the film weren't fleshed out much, so when the DVD came out, they gave each and every ghost a little backstory to explain where they came from and just what exactly happened to them. The Firstborn Son. Billy Michaels was chosen by Cyrus as the Firstborn Son. The young boy had a fascination with westerns, often playing cowboys and Indians. His parents grew tired of his obsession, but as hard as they tried, they couldn't get their son to drop his strange hobby. However, one day, a neighbor boy would find a real bow and arrow in his father's closet. He coaxed Billy out into having a real-life duel, but Billy's little cap gun was no match for the cold, hard steel that would soon penetrate his skull. Billy is often seen dressed as a cowboy with native headdress and carrying a tomahawk as his weapon of choice. The Firstborn Son was played by Michael Speedle. The Torso. Jimmy the Gambler Gambino really lived up to his namesake. The son of a bookie, Jimmy would spend most of his days skipping school and hanging out at the racetrack. Eventually, he would come to be a bookie himself. However, due to the fact that he could never turn down a bet, he made just enough money to stay afloat. Jimmy's reputation of losing just as much as he won would draw the attention of Larry the Finger Vitello. Larry wanted to place a very large bet on the upcoming heavyweight fight, and not wanting to tarnish his reputation, Jimmy took it. Larry's fighter won the fight, but when he came to claim his money, Jimmy was already cleaned out. Larry wasn't about to be made a fool, so he grabbed Jimmy and along with his men began to dismember the man, wrapping each piece in cellophane and tossing the pieces into the river. The Torso was played by Daniel Wesley, a man who is an actual double amputee. To remove his head, they simply had him wear a black hood, which allowed them to remove it in post with CGI. The Bound Woman. Susan LeGros grew up with a very privileged life. Her parents were the richest people in town, giving Susan whatever she wanted. Because of her wealth, Susan quickly became the most popular girl in her school. The money just wasn't enough, however. Susan also liked to break the hearts of the boys that pined for her. She would go from boy to boy, leaving a trail of broken hearts, and it gave her some weird pleasure. In her senior year, she would end up dating the captain of the football team, Chet Walters. On prom night, Chet found Susan getting a little too familiar with another boy. The boy's body was found the next morning brutally beaten, and Susan was missing. 2 weeks had passed when her body was found buried on the 50-yard line of the football field. Susan had been bound with rope and strangled with Chet's tie. For the murders, Chet was arrested and put on death row. However, he seemed to have no remorse for what he had done to Susan. The Bound Woman was played by Canadian actress Laura Mennell. The Withered Lover. Jean Criticos, the mother of the Criticos family. She met her end one fateful night after the family had spent the night decorating the Christmas tree and snuggling by a roaring fire. However, forgetting to put the fire out before they went to bed, a single log rolled out in the middle of the night and caused the tree to burst into flames. Arthur rushed to get his children out of the house, assuming his wife would run outside. He was wrong, however, as she became trapped inside because of all the smoke. Firefighters came but wouldn't allow Arthur or the kids back inside, and Jean would end up losing her life. Jean Criticos, the Withered Lover, was played by Katherine Anderson. The Torn Prince. Royce Clayton, born in the 1940s, would become a very gifted baseball player. When he was 17, all the colleges wanted him. However, he would never actually see the inside of one. Fate came calling one night when a local greaser challenged Royce to a race. Royce, unable to turn down a challenge, accepted and seemed to be doing great during the first half mile anyways. That was until he lost control and ended in a fiery crash. All his friends and onlookers shrieked in horror as they watched their friend burn in the fire. Royce would end up being buried in a small plot that overlooked the ball field where he used to play. Some others claim that there was no fire at all and that he was simply dragged when the car flipped. The Torn Prince will be played by Canadian actor Craig Olenek. The Angry Princess. Dana Newman was an incredibly beautiful woman. However, she just couldn't see it. Anytime she looked in a mirror, all she could see were imperfections. Because of her low self-esteem, Dana would have a series of abusive boyfriends and doctors that just wanted to pump her full of drugs. To fix her imperfections, she would get breast implants and nose jobs, anything to fix what she thought was wrong. One night she was alone in the clinic where she worked, so she decided to perform a surgery on herself to fix what she saw as an imperfection. The procedure was botched and she was left blind in her left eye. Unable to come to terms with how she looked, Dana got into the bathtub and began slashing and mutilating herself, draining her body of its blood in the process. In the original script, she would have been called the Suicide, with slash marks across her wrists and mascara smeared across her face. Shauna Lawyer played the Angry Princess, and her makeup was one of the more exhausting and time-consuming to complete as it was a full-body job. This was her one and only acting role, wanting to focus on being a mother instead of an actress. These days, she has something of a following because of this role, and I'm guessing being naked through the entirety of the film has something to do with it. The Pilgrimes. In 1675, Isabella Smith left England for a small town in New England, hoping to find a better life. However, the people of the town were untrusting of outsiders. When livestock began to fall ill, the preacher thought Isabella may be responsible. However, she denied these claims. It wasn't until the preacher himself became ill as well that the townsfolk thought Isabella could possibly be a witch. Isabella was forced into a barn, which the townsfolk lit aflame. To their shock, Isabella managed to escape with not a single burn mark on her. Because this confirmed in their minds that she was in fact a witch, poor Isabella was sentenced to an even slower death when she was sent to the stocks. Bound up and forced to starve, while women cursed her and kids threw rocks at her. She would eventually succumb to the starvation, becoming the ghost known as the Pilgrimess, played by Canadian actress Xantha Radley. The Great Child and the Dire Mother. Harold Shelburne was born to Margaret Shelburne after she was raped by a man simply known as the Tall Man. She was overly protective, spoiling him and treating him like a baby no matter how old he got. Harold never developed mentally beyond that of a child because of Margaret's overprotective nature, which led to Harold wearing diapers for the entirety of his life. They would often get mocked and ridiculed, so in order to escape the harassment, they joined the local circus run by a man named Jimbo. Though this didn't stop them from being mocked. One night, some of the freak show workers kidnapped Margaret, and this threw Harold into a blind rage. He destroyed the entire carnival looking for his mother, and when he found her, she had suffocated to death. He then lost complete control, grabbing an axe and hacking each and every freak to pieces, displaying what was left of them for all to see. When Jimbo found out what had taken place, he ordered Harold be mutilated in some of the most horrific ways imaginable. The original backstory for Harold had him choking to death on his own vomit, but this was changed as it wasn't seen as being dark enough. Unlike a lot of the ghosts, it's assumed that Harold isn't violent, he's just protective. So as long as you leave his mother alone, then he will most likely leave you alone. The Great Child was played by Canadian actor C. Ernst Harth. Margaret's original death was going to take place when Harold choked on his vomit. He was going to choke and then fall on her, suffocating her in the process. But again, it wasn't dark enough for the film. The Dire Mother was played by American actress Laurie Soper. The Hammer. George Markley was a hard-working blacksmith in the 1890s. One day, a man named Nathan claimed George had stolen and tried to run him out of town. However, George knew he was innocent and he wasn't going anywhere. One day, while his wife and children were out walking, Nathan and his gang attacked and brutally murdered them. George became filled with rage and found Nathan and his men, brutally clubbing them all to death with his mighty blacksmith's hammer. The local townsfolk found George and dragged him to a tree where they embedded massive blacksmithing nails throughout his body. To cap things off, they cut off his prized possession, which was the hand he used to swing his hammer. Howard Berger of K&B Effects said that originally the makeup took roughly 4 hours to complete each day. However, by the end, they were able to get it down to 2. Herbert Duncanson played the hammer, but he wasn't the original choice. Herbert was a stand-in, but when the original actor never showed up, they didn't have time to recast and gave Herbert the role. The Jackal. Ryan Kuhn was born in 1887 to a prostitute. As he grew up, he became increasingly aggressive with women, prostitutes in particular. He would violently attack and rape them, until one day he decided to turn himself in to a local asylum to hopefully quell this rage. Things only seemed to get worse, however. He would become even more violent while inside his padded cell, eventually scraping his fingernails clean off his fingers. The doctors would permanently place Ryan inside a straitjacket, tying it tighter and tighter anytime he began to become enraged. This caused his limbs to contort in incredibly painful ways. One day, Ryan's rage peaked when he began to gnaw his way out of a straitjacket. This caused the doctors to place a metal cage on his head and put him down into the asylum's basement. One day, the asylum caught on fire, and while everyone escaped, Ryan decided to stay behind and accepted his fate as he burned to death. In the original script, the Jackal was named the Hyena. The Jackal was played by actor Shane Weiler. The Juggernaut. Horace Breaker Mahoney was born greatly oversized as a child, leaving him to be ridiculed and shunned by the other children. His mother, unable to deal with her son's odd appearance, abandoned him, leaving him with his father. His father put him to work in the junkyard, where he spent most of his days. However, after his father's passing, Horace seemed to snap. He took 2 women back to the junkyard, where he proceeded to tear them apart with his bare hands. Horace would continue taking stranded people back to the junkyard, breaking nearly every bone in their bodies. He continued this until one day, 7 police arrived and arrested him. However, Horace, being a 7-foot monstrosity, he managed to break free from his handcuffs and killed 3 of the officers. The other 4 fired 50 rounds into Horace until he dropped to the ground dead. The Juggernaut's makeup would take roughly 3 hours to apply and 2 hours to remove after filming. It consisted of a bodysuit, neck piece, earpiece, upper lip, chin piece, hands, and forehead. The Juggernaut was played by John DeSantis, who was the most seasoned actor out of all the ghosts, appearing in shows like Supernatural, The X-Files, and The New Addams Family. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video looking at 13 ghosts and the ghosts themselves. Are you a fan of this film? It's not a great movie, but there's still something oddly watchable about it, and I think it's all the fun ghost designs. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.